Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. A couple of days ago, I got invited to a private presentation of Warhammer 40K Dark Heresy. It was 2.5 hours of wall-to-wall information in regards to the game. So unfortunately, there's just no way I can get to all of it here, but I'm going to provide you all with a small summary. Now, keep in mind, I will not be able to show you any footage from that presentation. In fact, originally, we were not even allowed to talk about the presentation until the alpha was already out. But Stark talked to a couple of people and pulled some strings and allowed us to be able to at least give you all some information prior to Tuesday so you can make a decision about whether or not you want to purchase this game and play the alpha for yourself. Keep in mind, since I can't show you anything, you don't have to actually watch the video if you don't want to. You could just listen to it as I walk through the information, because what's on the screen is probably not going to correlate very much to what I'm talking about. And one final note before we go ahead and get started, if you haven't already, I can't recommend highly enough you go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future content. Obviously, I'm going to continue covering Dark Heresy heavy, so stay locked in right here and ensure you don't miss any future videos. All right, the presentation for the most part was done by Anatoly Shestov, who is the executive producer for Dark Heresy, and he also serves as the creative director for the game as well. Now, he jumps right into the game and reveals that we're actually going to end up playing pre-packaged characters, so you're not going to be able to choose your own portrait or archetype or things of that nature. Instead, it's going to be two different characters you can choose from, and both of them have already made selections as far as what happens in the prologue. So we do not play through the prologue in the alpha. Instead, the game drops us right into Act 1, where some things have already occurred, which I won't reveal here, and we're basically kind of stranded and have to figure out how to break out of the part of the Hive City that we're currently in. Now, one thing you are able to choose is your difficulty, but unfair is currently not available, so only normal and daring can be selected. Right off the bat, Dark Heresy looks significantly better than Rogue Trader. Areas and models look significantly more detailed. The area we were put into was massive, not only in terms of how large the area was, but also how vertical it was. The verticality is on full display, and the area we start in looks extremely layered. It's going to be interesting to see how that works out over time. A question was asked about whether or not we're going to be able to go up and down on the maps to show the different levels, and we were told no, because the developers feel like as of right now the maps are clear enough where you can tell where you are and where certain things are located, even though you're not going through specifically the different levels. But we'll see whether or not that holds up when people actually get their hands on the game. Now, in order to exit from this area that you're locked in, you need permission from one of two people. Now, one of them is Sister Septima, who is the battle sister that we've seen an NPC portrait from before. And then another one is Inquisitor Millicentilla, who you will have seen a portrait of in the thumbnail for this video, and I'll probably place it up here as well because Owlcat recently released it over on Twitter. So those are the two individuals who basically run that section, and each of them have tasks for you, things that they want you to do. They're kind of supposed to be working together, but they're also not, for reasons that we'll get into in just a bit. When you first meet the Inquisitor, a cinematic is shown of her intimidating someone she's supposed to be interrogating, and there's a very low, interesting angle that we didn't really see in cinematics within Rogue Trader. And Anatoly said most definitely Owlcat put a major focus on cinematics for Dark Heresy, so we're going to see a lot more of them, and they're going to be a lot more intricate and detailed the way that we saw in some of the DLC that they've dropped recently for the game. Now, in both your conversations with the Inquisitor and Sister Septima, they are going to give you cases that go into your investigative journal that I discussed in a previous video. there are constantly new clues being given to you towards the cases that you pick up. And when you go to view these clues in the journal, you'll see a full section of the dialogue that provided you with the clue. So it doesn't give you a little one sentence answer about what the clue is. Instead, the journal will provide you with the full context that the clue was provided in. And Owlcat said the reason that they did that is they want to account for people having different lines of reasoning. So sometimes you'll have to look at not only the clue, but who gave it to you and the manner in which they communicated it to you in order to figure out whether or not you believe that clue and how it fits into your overall case. So they give you more details in order to help make sure you have the information you need in order to do that. One of the cases that we did for the Inquisitor asked us to reconstruct a scene. So we had to click around in different objects in the environment and try to figure out, all right, who stole this food? Whose footprints were these, et cetera, et cetera. Each clue had at least 3 different possible answers. So it's not a situation where you can do things one way and then come back and just do it another way to potentially get a different result. There are multiple different results that are possible from the different cases that you picked up. Now, Anatoly allowed us to basically make decisions about what he chose in dialogue, and I asked him to purposefully give the wrong answers for this particular case, and the Inquisitor made it clear she strongly disagreed with the answers that we provided, but it wasn't like there was a punishment and we weren't blocked from moving forward. So towards the end of the presentation, Spell and Shield asked an interesting question about what are they doing to make this experience valuable for people who maybe aren't good at figuring out cases and consistently give the wrong answer. Are they going to have less of an experience? And Anatoly said no, because at the end of the day, for the most part, you do the judging. You are not the one being judged. So if you decide to point the finger at someone who was innocent or someone who really wasn't involved in the case, that's just what you decide to do, and the game will move forward accordingly. It's not a situation where there's necessarily a right or wrong in a way where you'll be punished for doing one thing while you're rewarded for another thing. Even though my understanding from how they talked about these cases before is that based on the information provided, you will be able to tell who actually committed the crime and therefore provide the right answer if that's something that's important to you. So it'll be very, very interesting to see the reactivity based on how you handle these cases and whether or not it holds up regardless of how it all works out. Another thing that's not clear to me is how often do you need to reference these clues? So is it going to be a situation where you actually have to look at the different clues and figure out how they piece together yourself in order to determine how to move a case forward? Or is it more so going to be, hey, click this button, have this particular character research this clue, and then you'll automatically be updated with, hey, just go here next to advance with the case? I'm not sure how involved looking through all these different clues is going to be. So that'll definitely be a watch point when we get our hands on the alpha. But frankly, I'm not even sure if we'll be able to tell that from the content in the alpha. That might require beta or even full release before we really have an answer on that particular subject. All right, moving on, let's talk about the companions. So when you start the game, you actually have 3 companions right off the rip. First up, we've seen a couple of screenshots with a sanctioned psyker that has not been previously named. So his name is Sero, and as far as I know, Owlcat hasn't really released anything about him, but he's a pyromancer, so he was able to use some fire abilities during combat, and it appears that he's more good aligned or maybe iconoclast. There was at least one situation where he asked the main character to show mercy towards some individuals. It'll be interesting to see if any of your characters have a serious issue with you if you consistently act in a very evil or unmerciful manner. Now, you also start with Epion Space. I'm not sure if that's the correct way to pronounce their name, but basically the Medikai specialist who's a part of the Tyrantine Cabal. So she's focused on healing and buffing, but she also had a flamethrower. I don't know if that's automatically part of her kit or if that's something that was just placed on her, but she did have a talent that gave her more armor based on how many people were on fire in the battle. And definitely from what I saw, she could do some really cool things. So I look forward to having her in my party. Next up is Haymar DeVos, who is the Astra Militarum party member. He was armed with a heavy stutter, so he was able to do those burst attacks that we love so much with Argenta. In fact, he had a talent that allowed him to get higher rates of fire based upon his ranks in certain areas. Seems like if you want that all-powerful Argenta build where her gun just seems to fire on and on and on and on, he might be the guy to make that possible. I'll definitely be looking at that. So those are the companions that we started the game with, but then very shortly into the presentation, we were able to recruit the Aldari Lothar. So the Inquisitor's mission involved picking him up. When you first meet him, again, he has a great cinematic that shows off some of his power, really cool stuff, and adds to his mystery. He has psycho abilities, and at least one of them can interrupt another enemy's concentration attack. So in Dark Heresy, some abilities or actions will require concentration, where you won't be able to do it immediately, and you have to concentrate on doing it for a while before you'll be able to execute that. And sometimes it could be simple tasks like just closing a door during combat that they won't let you do right off the bat. In the combat scenario that we were shown, there was a boss enemy trying to execute a civilian, and Anatoly wanted to stop him. So he attempted to use a psyker ability to essentially break that character's concentration, and it didn't work out. It didn't work out at all. So it'll be interesting to see what is required in order to make those psyker abilities hit more often and help ensure that those concentration breaks land the way you want them to. We'll definitely talk more about combat in a bit. So shortly after recruiting the Aldari, we also recruited Cog. And let me just say, I love this. We are getting a large portion of pretty much all the party members back to back to back. And it's even faster than it was in Rogue Trader, because in Rogue Trader, you had to complete certain things. So you had to do like a 30-45 mission before you could get to Cassia. You had to go through multiple fights before you could get to Pascal. But in the case of Lothar and Cog, you could recruit both of them without even having a fight. It was all just dialogue, and you already started with 3 party members up front as well. So really cool. I like the way Owlcat is doing that. Cog obviously is a beastly tank. In combat, enemies kept missing him. It was amazing. And his attacks feel like they have real impact. When he slams that club into somebody's head, it looks absolutely brutal. They did show a shop during the presentation, so we will have to actually buy items since we are not a Rogue Trader anymore. And one of the items available was an Ogren Heavy Bolter, which obviously again brought back fond memories of Argenta. So I'm gonna have to make a hard decision about whether Cog or Haymar is the one who's gonna go the heavy bolter or the heavy stuttered route. But either way, Cog is thus far everything that I wanted him to be, and I'm really looking forward to having him in the party. Since we were on the subject of shops, you do have a reputation score with shops, but now there's 2 separate bars that decide your reputation, and one of them marks your allyship essentially, or like how much these shops like you, and then the other one marks how much they fear you. So sometimes you can unlock items just because the particular organization fears what would happen if they try to keep you from getting an item, which is really cool and interesting. So I'm looking forward to playing around with that for sure. Now, we didn't get a chance to recruit the very last companion, but it was obvious based on where the cases ended that seeing her was the next thing that we were going to do. So all in all, really cool. I am so happy to see Owlcat front load your companions, especially not just because of what that does for you thematically, but also as far as builds. Being able to have much more control early on all of these characters is going to be amazing for many of us. Now, another aspect of the game that has went through some changes is skills. So Owlcat only mentioned in Rogue Trader he felt like there wasn't enough integration of skills into role-playing all parts of the game. So combat skills only really applied to combat. Dialogue skills only really applied to dialogue. He wants to kind of blow that up, where all of the skills are being used across all aspects of the game at any point in time. So it sounds like skills are going to be even more important in Dark Heresy than they were in Rogue Trader. And he also mentioned that as far as the checks you have to go through, very rarely will your characteristic get checked. They want to put a greater focus on ensuring that at all times it's a specific skill that's being checked when the game asks you to do something. So they're not going to give you a strength check, they're going to give you an athletics check, etc. Now, because of this change in focus, some skills have been removed while others have been added. So carouse, coercion, commerce, logic, and lore imperium have all been removed as far as I can tell. And then in their place, tenacity has been added under strength, and I believe tenacity basically does the same thing as carouse as far as allowing you to be more resistant to different effects and elements. For all of these skills, if there's something I say that's wrong or that's missing, just let us know down in the comments. I would definitely love to hear more information. Now, another skill that's been added is one that's under agility. They did not have the name in there yet, but I'm going to take a guess that it's jump related, that there's probably a skill that regulates how good you are at scaling some of these cliffs. By the way, cliffs that you can climb up are pretty much everywhere, especially in combat, and I'm pretty sure whatever type of character I make for the first full live stream when this game launches, I want it to be someone who can jump around everywhere. I love the idea of being able to quickly just scale up a particular area and slice up a bunch of enemies. So that's something I'm definitely going to be going for. Another new skill that's under agility is sleight of hand. So it seems like we're going to have the ability to steal things from characters when need be. That could definitely be useful. Now, moving on to intelligence, a new skill that they have is lore heresy. So that's interesting. So you still have lore warp and you still have lore xenos, but now you also have lore heresy added onto it. In addition, we have investigation, which is going to be a skill unto itself. This actually came up a couple of times, and it appears, at least in conversation, I don't know how it works outside of conversation, but in conversation, it appears that it'll allow you to ask more questions that specifically relate to a case that you have. So you're going to get more valuable information when you're having certain dialogues. Willpower now also has a couple of skills, whereas I believe in Rogue Trader it didn't have any skills associated with it. So wits is associated with willpower. I am not completely clear on how wits is different from awareness. When I Googled it, it seems like awareness is more so about discovering traps or things in the environment, where wits helps you more when you're talking with people or when you're trying to react to something that someone else has done. That appears to be it. But if some of you have actually played through Dark Heresy, have another perspective, again, just let me know down in the comments. There's also the interrogation skill. So it seems like an interrogation interrogations, you might have to match your willpower against another character's willpower in order to essentially bend them to your will. And now there was one other section where it kind of felt like an interrogation, where interrogation did not come up and instead we had a diplomacy option, but that might be because the Inquisitor had already kind of worked over the guy. So maybe interrogation is more so about situations where someone is at full strength and then you have to use certain objects or certain dialogue options in order to convince them to give you the information that you want. And then finally, under Fellowship, we now have Metal. I have no idea what the Metal skill is supposed to provide, but I think you get the picture. Skills have definitely been changed around, and it'll be interesting to see if players believe that skills work in a better way for Dark Heresy than they did in Rogue Trader. Now, with all of that spoken about, let's go ahead and get into the combat. So there was one combat scenario showed, and it was a doozy. So you had enemies on the ground floor, plenty of them. Then there were enemies up top. And then there was like an interior section where the boss was basically trying to execute all of the civilians. And there was a door that could close that off. So right at the beginning of combat, one of the enemies tried to start concentrating to close that door and essentially make it harder for you to stop these executions if that's what you wanted to do. Now, one of the things we talked about in a previous video is the new armor system. So armor now works basically as an additional health bar that enemies have to deplete before they can get to your wounds. Now, there are some weapons that'll directly hit your wounds even if you have armor, but for the most part, they've got to get through your armor first. There are also some weapons that'll allow you to hit specific body parts, such as the head or the arms or the leg, and then each one of them can injure your enemies in different ways that'll cause different effects, such as them not being able to move or them not being able to deliver critical hits, things of that nature. You cannot deliver these injuries if an opponent still has armor on them. So it gives you more options as far as how to deal with an enemy once the armor has been depleted. So I've heard some of you say that you felt like this was similar to DOS 2. It's not. It feels completely different because in DOS 2, you basically had to use two different types of attacks or choose one type of attack and then completely ignore the other. So either you completely focused on physical attacks or you completely focused on magic attacks. In this case, there are a bunch of different things that'll absolutely work for armor and it'll work for wounds, even though it might not do it as well. And then there are a bunch of other actions as well that'll help you just actually kill off an enemy. So in practice and looking at it, at least, it doesn't feel all that similar at all. Now, in a very interesting change from Rogue Trader, a lot of the abilities that you use can be combined with modifiers. So for example, Bring It Down, which allows one character to have an additional turn with a couple of AP, that ability was being used by the main character who's a noble. And as a noble, you could potentially have a modifier that allows the damage of the character who's getting this extra turn to increase based on your morale. And according to Anatoly, there's gonna be a lot of different modifiers that we can potentially use to change the way abilities work and really customize our party. So even if two people are both nobles and they're both officers, we could potentially have very, very different kits, which is super cool. There's definitely some variety in Rogue Trader, but at the end of the day, what really works is kind of all the same. And so having these modifiers that'll allow you to focus on different things gives much more variety in what's effective in the game, and I'm excited to see what Owlcat comes up with. Now, I mentioned before, concentration is an aspect of this game, and you do get abilities that can potentially break concentration. Grenades automatically break concentration, and once again, they're plentiful for everybody involved, and you can also use them to take out cover that enemies are behind. Not clear yet whether or not the partial partial and full cover system of Rogue Trader is present in Dark Heresy. That's some of the stuff we'll dig into more once I have access to the alpha. And that's it. And now that might have seemed like a long video with a lot of information. To be honest with you, I barely scratched the surface. I barely scratched the surface of what that presentation provided and let us know. But you can be sure, once again, on Tuesday, when we have access to the alpha, I'll be all over it, and I'll be very, very happy to break everything down for all of you. Anyway, if you have any specific questions, let me know down in the comments. If it was asked during the AMA, I would definitely let you know that information. Very, very excited. Cannot wait to be able to play the alpha and tell you all more. I hope you all are excited as well. Once again, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, hit that like button, and let me know that you enjoyed this video. I will see you on the next video. Take care.